Have you ever seen someone's pain turned into laughter right before your eyes? The morning sun bled orange across Umuaku Market, but Mama Ebere felt no warmth. She arranged her tomatoes with trembling fingers, each one bruised, soft in places where rot had begun its quiet work. They mirrored her life, damaged goods that no one wanted to touch. "Ebere, go fetch water from the well," she whispered to her daughter, not meeting the girl's eyes. She knew what was coming. Every market day brought the same ritual of cruelty, and she couldn't bear for her child to witness it again. But 14-year-old Ebere didn't move. Her jaw was set, her eyes burning with the kind of anger that comes from watching your mother bleed in silence. "No, Mama, I'm staying." Before Mama Ebere could protest, Ijeoma's voice cut through the morning air like a machete through sugarcane.
See who has come to bless us with her presence." Ijeoma's laughter was loud enough to turn heads 3 stalls away. She was the queen of the market, a woman whose tongue was sharper than her business sense, whose cruelty had earned her both fear and followers. Other traders joined in, circling like vultures who'd spotted carrion. "Those tomatoes, Seth," another woman sneered. "Even flies are rejecting them, just like how her husband's spirit rejected her. That's why he died and left her with nothing." The words landed like stones. Mama Ebere's hand stilled over her basket. For a moment, something flickered in her eyes. Not anger, but a deep, oceanic sadness that seemed older than her 38 years.
Ebere's fists clenched. "My father died of fever. He was a good man who—" "Ebere," her mother's voice was soft but final. "Hush, my daughter." "But Mama, the dog that barks at every shadow exhausts itself before the real threat appears." Mama Ebere's proverb hung in the air, confusing the girl into silence. Ijeoma stepped closer, her wrapper rustling with the confidence of someone who'd never known consequences. She picked up one of Mama Ebere's tomatoes, squeezed it until the juice ran between her fingers, and dropped it into the dust. "Worthless," she pronounced, just like the woman selling them. The market laughed, but in that moment, something shifted in the air, something the traders couldn't see. The wind changed direction. A crow called out 3 times from the mango tree. And far down the dusty road, a figure in white began walking toward Umuaku Market. The laughter still echoed through the market when Mama Ebere knelt to retrieve her crushed tomato. Her fingers worked slowly, deliberately, as if the simple act of salvaging what remained held some sacred meaning. She pressed the broken fruit gently back into her basket, ignoring the red stain spreading across her palm. Ebere watched her mother with tears burning behind her eyes. How could she be so calm? How could she swallow this poison day after day without choking on it? "Your silence will kill you one day," Ebere whispered, her voice cracking. Mama Ebere looked up at her daughter, and for the first time that morning, she smiled. A smile that carried the weight of knowledge Ebere couldn't yet understand. "No, my child, my silence will save me." The traders had returned to their stalls, satisfied with their morning's entertainment. Ijeoma was counting money, her fingers moving swiftly through the Naira notes as she negotiated with a customer. The market resumed its rhythm, haggling voices, the sizzle of akara frying in hot oil, the bleating of goats tied to wooden posts. But then the temperature dropped. It wasn't dramatic, just a subtle shift that made people unconsciously pull their wrappers tighter. The bright morning seemed to dim, as if a cloud had passed over the sun, though the sky remained perfectly clear. Mama Ngozi, the oldest trader in the market, was the first to notice her. She stopped mid-sentence, her mouth hanging open, her eyes fixed on something beyond the cassava stall. A woman was walking through the market entrance. She moved like water, fluid, unhurried, inevitable. Her wrapper was pure white, so white it seemed to glow against the dusty red earth. A veil covered her face, delicate as spider silk, revealing only the dark gleam of her eyes. In her hand she carried a walking stick carved from Iroko wood, its surface etched with symbols that seemed to shift and dance in the light.
The noise of the market died like a flame starved of oxygen. One by one, the traders fell silent. Even the children stopped their playing. Something about this woman commanded attention without demanding it. Her presence was both question and answer, both warning and promise. She walked slowly through the market, her bare feet making no sound on the ground. Her gaze swept across the stalls, across the faces of women who suddenly found themselves unable to meet her eyes. When she passed Igioma's stall, the trader's money slipped from her fingers, scattering across the ground like worthless leaves. The stranger stopped. She stood directly in front of Mama Ebere's small mat, looking down at the bruised tomatoes, the worn basket, the woman whose dignity poverty couldn't quite erase.
For a long moment, neither spoke. Then the stranger knelt, slowly, gracefully, until she was eye level with Mama Ebere. Through the veil, her voice emerged soft as silk, sharp as truth. "Daughter of sorrow," she said, "do you know why you suffer?" Mama Ebere's breath caught. Beside her, Ebere's hand found her mother's arm, gripping tight. "I suffer because I am poor," Mama Ebere answered quietly. "Because I am alone. Because the world has no mercy for widows." The stranger's head tilted slightly. "No." Her finger pointed, not at Mama Ebere, but at the watching crowd. "You suffer because they need someone to stand beneath them. Your humility threatens their pride. Your patience exposes their cruelty. Your silence screams truths they cannot bear to hear." Ayoma found her voice, though it trembled. "Who are you to speak such things? This is our market. You have no authority here." The stranger rose, turning slowly toward the bold trader. The market held its breath. Authority. The words seemed to taste bitter on her tongue. "I need no authority to speak what the heavens have already written." She raised her walking stick, pointing it toward the sky. "Before the sun sets on this market, truth will separate the wheat from the chaff. And the one you mock today will become the mirror in which you see your own shame." Thunder rumbled in the distance, though no clouds marred the sky. The stranger turned back to Mama Ebere one final time. "What comes next will test not your strength, but theirs." Then she walked away, her white wrapper flowing behind her like mist. The market remained frozen, watching until she disappeared around the corner of the compound wall. When she was gone, the sounds of life slowly returned, but quieter now, uncertain, as if everyone feared speaking too loudly might invoke something they didn't understand. Mama Ebere stared at her tomatoes, her heart pounding against her ribs. Ebere leaned close. "Mama, who was that?" "I don't know," Mama Ebere whispered, but her hands were shaking, and deep in her chest,
Something long dormant had begun to wake. Night fell over Umwaku like a burial cloth, heavy and complete.
In her small mud hut, Mama Ebere couldn't sleep. She lay on her thin mat, listening to Ebere's breathing beside her, watching shadows dance across the wall from the dying embers of their cooking fire. The stranger's words circled in her mind like birds of prey. Your silence has been heard by those who matter. But who? Who had heard her? She had prayed, yes, whispered desperate pleas to her chi, to her ancestors, to any spirit that might listen to a widow's grief. But prayers felt like throwing stones into a bottomless well. You never heard them land. She must have eventually slept because she dreamed. In the dream, she stood in a palace made entirely of light. A woman sat on a throne carved from a single moonstone, her face both familiar and strange. When the woman spoke, her voice carried the weight of generations. Your tears have watered seeds you cannot yet see, but tomorrow the harvest begins, whether you are ready or not. Mama Ibere woke with a gasp just as the first rooster crowed. The market was already buzzing when they arrived, but something was different. The usual aggressive energy, the shoving, the loud bargaining, the territorial claims over space had been replaced by a nervous quiet. Traders set up their stalls with quick, furtive movements, glancing over their shoulders as if expecting something to emerge from the shadows. Mama Ibere felt it too. The air tasted metallic, like blood or coming rain. She laid out her goods with the same careful attention she always did, but as her hand touched the first tomato, she froze. It was perfect. She lifted it slowly, turning it in the early morning light. The skin was flawless, deep red, firm, with a sheen that made it look almost jeweled. She reached for another, the same, and another. Every single piece of fruit in her basket glowed with impossible freshness, as if they'd been plucked from heaven's garden moments before. "Mama!" Ebere's voice was barely a whisper. "How is this possible? Last night they were—" "I know." Mama Ebere's hands trembled. The tomatoes she'd arranged yesterday had been half rotten, desperate offerings that only the poorest buyers would consider. She hadn't bought new ones. She had no money for new ones. Across the market, a scream shattered the morning. It was Ijeoma. Mama Ebere and Ebere stood, along with dozens of other traders, rushing toward the sound. They found Ijeoma standing over her stall, her hands covering her mouth, her eyes wide with horror. Her palm oil, 2 large clay pots that had been golden and pure yesterday, had turned black. Not just spoiled, but transformed into something that looked like tar, thick and reeking with a stench that made people gag and step back. "No, no, no!" Ijeoma was clawing at the pots, trying to scoop out the ruined oil, but it clung to her fingers like a curse. "This was fresh! I bought it fresh just 2 days ago!" But it wasn't just her stall. Mama Ngozi's yams, which had been prize specimens she'd been planning to sell at premium prices, had turned soft and black overnight, crawling with maggots that seemed to appear from nowhere. Another trader's dried fish crumbled to dust when she touched it. Baskets of ground nuts were infested with weevils so thick they moved like a living carpet. Within minutes, half the market was in chaos. Only the stalls of those who had remained neutral, who had neither mocked nor defended Mama Ebere, remained untouched. And Mama Ebere's stall glowed like a beacon. her produce so vibrant it seemed to pulse with life. People began to gather around her, not to buy, but to stare, to whisper, to wonder. "It's a curse," someone muttered. "No," another voice countered. "It's a blessing. Look at her goods." "Witchcraft," Ijeoma spat, her voice desperate and venomous.
She pushed through the crowd, pointing an accusing finger at Mama Ebere. "She's done this. That woman yesterday, that stranger, she was a witch, and this one paid her to curse us." Mama Ebere said nothing. She stood behind her basket of radiant produce, her face calm despite the storm gathering around her. Ijere stepped forward, her young voice cutting through the accusations. "My mother has done nothing. You mock her, you destroy her goods, you treat her like dirt, and when something you don't understand happens, you blame her?" "The child has a point," Mama Ngozi said slowly, though her voice carried fear. "We have not been kind." "Kind?" Ijeoma's laugh was bitter and sharp. "This is business, not a church. And now our livelihoods are destroyed, while hers flourishes? This is justice?" The crowd murmured, divided. Some sided with Ijeoma, fear making them cruel. Others backed away, uncertainty making them silent. Then Mama Ebere spoke, her voice quiet but clear enough to reach every ear. "I have cursed no one. I have no power to bless or destroy." She lifted one of her perfect tomatoes, holding it up for all to see. "I am as confused as you are, but I will say this. Yesterday a stranger spoke of truth, separating wheat from chaff. Perhaps what you see now is not my doing, but a mirror showing what has always been there." "Lies!" Ijeoma shrieked. "You're a witch, hiding behind humble words." Before anyone could respond, the wind picked up, sudden and cold, carrying with it the scent of incense and rain that hadn't yet fallen. The market fell silent, because walking through the entrance once again was the woman in white. She moved with the same unhurried grace, her veil flowing, her walking stick tapping a rhythm that felt older than time. The crowd parted like water before a stone. She stopped in the center of the market, equidistant from Mama Ebere's radiant stall and Ijeoma's rotting goods. "You want to know who is responsible?" Her voice carried without shouting, reaching into every corner, every conscience. "Then I will show you." She struck her walking stick against the ground 3 times. The earth trembled, and in that moment, every person in Umuaku Market saw something they would never forget, something that would change everything they thought they knew about guilt, innocence, and the price of cruelty. The stranger raised her hand toward the sky and spoke one word: Kupuhere, reveal. The word exploded through the market like thunder. The moment the stranger's walking stick struck the ground for the 3rd time, reality itself seemed to crack open. Shadows separated from their owners, rising like dark smoke given terrible form. Ijeoma screamed as her shadows stood before her, tall, accusing, and filled with every cruel deed she'd ever committed. All across the market, the shadows of those who'd mocked Mama Ebere rose to testify. The air shimmered, and visions appeared like ghostly cinema, memories made visible for all to witness. The crowd saw Ijeoma refusing to help when Mama Ebere's husband died. They saw Mama Ngozi spreading lies about spoiled vegetables. They saw coins stolen from a poor widow's basket while she fetched water. Every secret cruelty, every calculated humiliation, every moment of casual evil, all laid bare under the morning sun. Some traders wept. Others tried to run, but their shadows followed relentlessly. The market that had echoed with mockery
now filled with the sound of guilty consciences breaking open. But then the visions shifted. The crowd gasped as new scenes appeared, Mama Ebere in the darkness of night, dividing her few coins into careful piles. One pile for food, one for her daughter's future, and a third pile, always smaller, that she would wrap in palm leaves and leave at the doorsteps of struggling families. "That was you?" a woman whispered, recognizing her own threshold. "When my son was sick and I had no money for the herbalist. That anonymous gift." Mama Ebere stood silent, embarrassed to have her private kindness exposed as publicly as others' cruelty. The stranger's voice rang out. "The woman you called worthless gave from her poverty, while you hoarded from your plenty. The woman you cursed blessed you in secret, and now you ask why her goods shine while yours rot?" The shadows slowly sank back into the earth, but something fundamental had changed. The traders would never forget what they'd seen, what they'd been shown about themselves. Then came the sound that changed everything. Royal drums beating in the distance. A messenger in bronze leopard insignia strode into the market. "I seek the widow Ebere," he announced, then knelt before her in a gesture that shocked everyone. "The king requests your immediate presence. There are questions about the royal lineage." The market erupted in whispers. The stranger in white lifted her veil fully for the first time, revealing a face almost identical to Mama Ebere's. Same eyes, same bone structure, undeniable family resemblance. "Go to the palace, daughter," she said. "It's time you learned who you really are, and why your suffering was never random, but preparation for the throne that was stolen from your bloodline." She touched Mama Ebere's forehead, and suddenly memories flooded in. A palace burning, a baby wrapped in royal cloth carried into darkness, a golden bracelet slipped onto a tiny wrist. Mama Ebere gasped, staggering. Everything she knew about herself had just shattered and reformed. As she followed the messenger toward the palace, the stranger in white called after her, "Remember, daughter, in the palace trust only those whose shadows are light. And when the moment comes to choose between justice and mercy, remember the seed." At the palace, King Ikemba stared at Mama Ebere with tears in his eyes. "Adake," he whispered, "my sister, they told me you died in the fire 30 years ago." Chief Okonkwo produced a wooden box containing a golden bracelet, identical to the one on Mama Ebere's wrist. "Your mother wore two," he explained, "one for each of her children. The truth spilled out, a conspiracy, a fire meant to kill the infant princess, a banished aunt who'd saved her by hiding her among the poor. For 3 decades, Mama Ebere had lived in poverty not by accident, but because powerful men had tried to erase her from existence." As the palace erupted in accusations and revelations, Chief Emeka, son of one of the conspirators, panicked. In desperation, he lunged forward with a hidden dagger, determined to finish what his father had started. But Mama Ebere moved faster than anyone expected. She caught his wrist with surprising strength, twisted the blade from his grip, and held it up for all to see. "You want to kill me because you fear what I represent," she said calmly. "Change, accountability, a kingdom where the powerful can no longer act without consequence." She could have driven the blade into him. Everyone would have called it justice. Instead, she handed the dagger to her brother and spoke the words that would define her reign. "Mercy does not mean no consequences. It means transformation instead of destruction."
She decreed that Emeka and the surviving conspirators would lose their wealth and power, but keep their lives, spending their remaining years serving the poorest villages, learning through experience what their victims had suffered. King Ikemba stepped forward, his voice filled with emotion. "Sister, our father wanted us to rule together. Will you serve as co-regent, my equal, and help rebuild what corruption has broken?" Mama Abere looked at young Abere, then at the assembled crowd. "Yes, but only if we transform the systems that allowed these crimes. A kingdom where widows aren't mocked, where women lead without fear, where mercy and justice walk together." "I promise to try," the king said, "with your help."
As celebration filled the palace, Nwanyoma appeared one final time. "You chose well, daughter. The seed over the crown, mercy over vengeance. Now my purpose is complete." She began to fade like morning mist. "But I'll always be with you in every choice you make for compassion over bitterness." She dissolved into light, leaving only her blessing behind. 3 months later, Mama Ebere knelt in the palace gardens, planting a mango seedling, despite protests from attendants who insisted princesses didn't do manual labor. "In 20 years, this tree will feed people I'll never meet," she told Ebere, who knelt beside her. "That's what ruling means, planting seeds whose fruit you'll never taste."
She stood, brushing dirt from her royal wrapper, and looked at the kingdom below. Markets now echoed with kindness instead of cruelty. Widows found protection instead of mockery. The woman nobody wanted had spoken one word that transformed a nation: forgiveness. But her true power wasn't just forgiving. It was showing that pain, transformed by purpose, becomes the strongest foundation for lasting change. The seed had been chosen. The seed had been planted. And across Umunaku, people were learning that mercy isn't weakness. It's the power that heals kingdoms.
Did this story touch your heart? Mama Ebere's journey from humiliated widow to wise co-regent proves that our darkest trials prepare us for our greatest purpose. Smash that like button if you believe forgiveness is stronger than revenge. Comment below, what would you have done with Chief Emeka? Have you ever chosen mercy when revenge was within reach? Which moment in this story hit you hardest? What will you do differently after hearing this tale? Subscribe and turn on notifications for more powerful African stories of transformation and triumph. New inspiring tales every week.